Please hit like, share, and subscribe. Now enjoy the Practical Guitarist podcast.
Good evening, Jim.
Well, good evening.
Was that an interesting way for me to begin my lamentations?
Good evening.
Because if you don't know, the greatest thing in life is to crush your enemies, see them before you, and the lamentations of the women.
Lamentations.
Yeah,
Not
that's from Conan. So I don't agree with that, but that's a Conan thing. He's a barbarian. Like he's not going to be.
I was just doing the what do you call it? Response. The kindergarten cop response.
Yeah.
Just not a tumor.
It's not a tumor. Yeah, I know.
It's not
I'm very well aware about him and Cindy taking long walks on the beach and going to the movies together. And yeah, that's a great movie. If you haven't watched it, you should probably brush up. There's some good stuff in there. I'm actually rebranding my Twitch, and so now when you click like and subscribe, well, I don't have subscriptions available yet, but when you click like, it has a picture of Arnold and says, "Come with me if you want to live," or follow. I guess.
That's so
yeah.
Awesome. Come with me if you want to live.
It's for the follow when you click the follow button.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And then when I already know that when I finally do make affiliate at some point, the subscription button will be him and Dylan from Predator grabbing hands and be like, Dylan,
Yeah.
Anyway, I actually think I probably should just overdub the voices of it too. That would be kind of funny too.
Yeah.
Anyway, gosh, so where do I start this weekend? All right, so Friday rolls around. I totally forgot that my gig is this weekend. I didn't prepare at all. Okay.
Oh no.
And so Saturday morning, I know the gig's I'm gonna have to be up there by 4:00. It's up on Highwood, so it's it's an hour from my house. So I get up at 8 a.m. I take a look at my pedal board. I realize I didn't do a lock a pedal down. I need to put battery.
Oh, no.
I need to put batteries in my Sunphase. I flip over my board and I see all these cables hanging, and I'm like, oh my god, I didn't even bother to zip tie things. I ran out of zip ties while I was finishing it off. Dude, it gets better. Trust me, it gets better. So then I'm like, all right, I did go the day before. I got bungee cords. I got all the things I need to deal with the situation, right? I got my cart. I loaded up the car. I actually did dry run, hooked everything up, played a little bit, took everything down, threw it on my cart, took it outside, put it in the car, drove all the way the hell up there, which is actually not a straight shot. You can't just take 294 up there. You have to get off and go the back roads, some of it, and it's because the road system in this city is it's a joke. Anybody who's lived in Chicago or driven through Chicago, I'm sure you have experienced the jokedness of it. So I went all the way up there and got there, and I was like, where do I park? And it's in a little downtown neighborhood, which is actually on the I guess Highland Park and Highwood share the same downtown. Anyway, so I'm driving around, where do I park? Finally texted the guys. I'm like, dudes, where's the parking? And so he's like, just park on the street. So then I had to do U-turn. After I'd already been driving around for 20 minutes, I had to do a U-turn and then go back and look for parking. So I ended up parking like 2 blocks north of the place. I get out. I load up my cart, which is always super awkward. You're standing in the street corner, hoping that somebody doesn't pull in behind you while the back door's open, while you're unloading amps and guitars and everything else. And it's a nice neighborhood, so I wasn't really worried about getting ripped off or anything. But what I'm always concerned about that. So I get my cart all loaded up, and get my bungee cords. It takes a good 15 minutes to load the cart up. And roll it down the street. And of course, my cart has these tiny wheels, and I keep getting stuck in the concrete. And I'm just manhandling this thing. And you can tell I manhandle it because my arm hurts really bad today. So get all the way down to the venue, run into the guys, and they're like, oh, go through the fence door into the parking lot area. Well, so they have like a lounge that they normally have in the summer, and then they have a parking lot, which is covered with a tent. So technically they would have had a parking lot,
Right.
But I go to the fence and I wheel my cart up and I bang into something. And I'm like, what the hell? And I look down and there's a gas line running in the walkway going through the gate. And I'm like, well, hopefully didn't break anything. I don't want to really explode in the middle of the performance. So I casually lift my cart over the gas line, hoping no one saw what had just happened. Rocked it over the thing and pulled it into the tent area. Somebody asked me, they're like, what the hell is that? Is that like an electrical line? I'm like, well, there's a gas. I said, there's a gas meter hooked up to it. So I'm pretty sure that's the gas line. And they said, yeah, that makes sense. I was like, yeah, no shit. It's not painted yellow. There's no, like sign on the wall that says, please step over, anything like that. It's just a gas line, not under concrete or anything, totally exposed for you to trip over, or run your cart into with, 100 pounds of gear on it.
Yeah, jeez.
So then I get there, like push it, go back all through here. And so like the venue's cool. They got like a tent set up. It's a big tent, like bigger than you'd see for most weddings. And it's enclosed there. So like I can't see the outside world. They can't see in. And so they got it set up so there's like a curb that they're using for the stage. And I'm already there. Sound guys, because it's part of a festival, they'd been there last night. The main guy was in another band, actually was in a band I was in years and years ago. And so I was like, where am I setting up? And it's always this big thing because there's 5 of us in this band. Plus this is the kicker. The band that Mike was performing in that night, he brought his Hammond to B3. So we had drums, and then we had like this keyboard station that was bigger than the drums. It's a Hammond B3 and the rotating speaker cabinet. Okay. I walk up to Mike because it's his gear. I'm like, dude, I didn't know you had a B3. And he goes, yeah, he's like, I've had it for a couple of years. And I'm like, how do you haul this thing? I was like, you have to rent a truck? He's like, no, he's like, I got a trailer. Wow. I'm like, you have a trailer. Okay.
You have a trailer.
Right, fair enough. Fair enough. I'm like, hey, I'm just sitting there thinking like, where's the trailer parked? Anyway, so, all of the stuff for them is already set up, and he helps me get my sound and stuff straightened out. I get my pedal board and I get my gear all hooked up. It takes me like 25 minutes to hook up the rig now because it's all analog gear. It's like the real deal stuff. And I mean, it sounds great, but we'll get there. So I get everything hooked up and then like go to hit the first chord. Nothing. I'm like, what the hell? Boy. So I start dicking around with my pedal board. I sit down on the ground. Like I turn my amp on standby and then turn my attenuator all the way up, turn the amp back to, play mode. And I'm touching the end of the cable and I'm going through and testing each end. And I dicked with it for like 20 minutes. And I couldn't even get the King of Tone by itself to work, which is the last pedal in my chain. So I'm like, what the fuck is wrong? And I'm dicking around. And then like, I unhooked the King of Tone and everything else works. I'm like, my King of Tone must be broke. And then I thought about it for a minute. I went, there's no fucking way this thing is broke. So I plugged it back in, stood up, dicked around, turned off the yellow side. Everything started working. I was like, oh, glorious. All I need is the red side anyway. And then I looked down and I realized the yellow side volume is at 0.
All the way down.
I had a conniption over the fact that I didn't even look at my damn knobs. And I just stood there for a minute and I just said, you fucking idiot.
You moron.
Yeah, like, because I'm like borderline having a panic attack. I'm like, if I had to, I could get through the gig with just the reverb and the distortion on the amp. It's not a big deal. I have my switcher, so I actually have my amp switcher that night. And I'm like, this is going to work out. It'll be fine. And then I realized, oh, my board's it's just me being an idiot. Board's fine. Actually, board was great. Although I had a wonky power cable running into the board, and I just reseated it and everything was good. So I ain't even gonna ask. I don't care.
Nope.
As long as it works. I got an extra power cable. If it goes out, I'll just swap it. Anyway, did a sound check. Everything was good. Except during the sound check, I look over and I see this. It's like this. There's a bunch of different people at this venue doing like gear related stuff, and I don't know. I don't have any of the inclination as to what exactly is going on. I see dudes coming in with cameras. There's projectors going in and out. I'm like, what in the fuck am I looking at? And there's this guy. Now, bear in mind, first night was Grateful Dead night. Second night was Fish night. We were on Fish night.
Okay.
There's a lot of people in Grateful Dead outfits that have come for both nights of the festival. And some of them happen to be roadies. Okay? And I don't know who they're road crewing for. There's only 4 bands, and 3 of them my buddy's in. Okay? So I'm like, the guy with the B3, Mike. I'm like, what the hell? Like, who are these people? He doesn't know who they are either. Or if he does, he's like not paying attention. So anyway, I see this guy. He's like hovering around my gear table where I've got my box of cable. There was nothing there he could steal. My box of cables and stuff. And he's like looking, and I realized I stuck my cart because it's convertible as like a dolly back in the corner. Actually pushed up against the tent and behind one of the posts because I'm like, oh, nobody will see it. Nobody will trip over it or knock it over or hurt themselves. And he's eyeing my cart. I'm watching this guy walk over there, and I'm like, hey, where you going? He's like, this cart. And I'm like, yeah, it's my cart. And he goes, well, we can use it. And he starts walking away with it. I said, you can ask.
Yeah.
And there was some expletives involved in this conversation. And I'm like, it would be nice if you asked, in not so nice words. And the guy says, he says, what's the weight capacity? And I said, it's 250 pounds. And I said, if you break that thing, I said, you're going to be hauling my gear to my car after the show's over. And, I said, you will be carrying my stuff to my car, and I said, it just like I'm saying it right now, you will be carrying my stuff to my car. And I think the guy got the message, like, don't really want to mess with this dude. Nope, you're not gonna, because I am not putting up with this crap. So he ends up taking my dolly, right? He asks, and I say, fine. And then I see him actually walking around with one of our band members, this is where shit gets really weird. One of our band members is helping them carry their shit in. I'm going, wait a minute. What? We don't even know who this company is. Like, this is a separate contracted company. And we're carrying their shit in? Wait a minute. There's deals and stuff going on here. Like, I'm sorry, these guys were paid. They can get off their ass and do their own thing. That is not our responsibility. Right. And maybe I'm being a jerk, but I'm like, I told our band member, I won't say who it was, but I told him, I said, you shouldn't do that, because I said, those guys have insurance on this gear and stuff. And if you drop something, they're going to want to hold you responsible for it.
That's right.
That's not your responsibility. That's their damn problem. Whether they have insurance or not, I'm like, I wouldn't touch it. You couldn't ask me to touch it. Like, I'd be like, no way. I didn't even like him grabbing my cart. So here it gets better, right? So we play the gig. I play really well. Everybody plays really well. And then get through our final song. Like, the crowd loves us, whatever. And then there's this like mad rush of, what the hell do we do now? Like, every time we play. And it's like, well, are we supposed to tear down now? Do we tear down later? That kind of thing. So I run over to Mike because he's running the show. Like, he's basically the promoter. He's the whole thing. He's the promoter. He's in 3 of the bands. He's, so he's like, he's a sound guy on top of it. And he's like, yeah, just tear down. Cause he's like, we're going to have a lot of stuff to bring in. And I'm like, I'm sitting there thinking, your B3 is sitting right there. What more could you possibly have to bring in? I mean, so I get I haul ass. I get my gear off stage. It takes me about 25 minutes. I mean, I got a lot of stuff to move. and try to do it neatly so I can start packing up. So I throw everything in bins. In the meantime, all the stuff that the table where all my stuff is, somebody picks it up and moves it. A patron. Okay? And I'm sitting there going, for real? Like, the loads of musical equipment sitting on this table prompt you to move it? Like, I don't understand people. Like, I'm lucky I had a lot of patience, because I, like, thinking about it today and talking to you now, and I talked to somebody else about it today. Like, if this was me 5 years ago, I'd have beat your ass. I would have just been like, you know what, we ain't gonna do this, to haul me to jail. I'm gonna kick the shit out of you, and that would have been the end of it. But apparently, my therapy is paying off, because I didn't even say a negative thing to him. I was like, whatever. I did have, however, because I was right in front of the stage, so like, we didn't have people sitting right in front of the stage. They were like 6 to 8 feet away. So I had enough room to like get a lot of my gear off and then get we'll get there. But I had to go get my cart and have space for it. These ladies were sitting at a table and they start scooching up right after we're done. They want to get as close to the next band as possible. And I'm like, wait a minute, what the hell is going on here? And as I'm loading up my cart, which will retroactive back to that in a second, as I'm loading up my cart, one of them makes a snippy ass comment to me. About like, oh, well, yeah, if you're going to be standing there messing around with your shit all night, like this, what a view. I turned around and I was like, excuse fucking me. I said, I have to clear my shit off the stage. And I said, if you got a problem with that, you can take it up with the manager. It's like, go right ahead,
right.
So I load it all up. I get it bungee cord and I move it. But the real kicker was, I getting all my shit together. These guys are moving the table and I'm going, where's my cart? Where is my goddamn cart? So I walked down to the other end of the tent where they have all the audio equipment and audio visual equipment. By the way, the crew that was road crewing, they brought in cameras. They were live streaming the main band. They brought in 3 cameras. They brought in like 6 projectors and probably $5,000 worth of controller gear. And it's all sitting on this table over in the corner. $5,000 worth of rental cost gear. Okay, this is the big stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, dude, there's like 50 people here. Like, what the hell are you guys doing? Anyway, I walk over there and I'm like, where's my cart? And I said it out loud and like 4 people looked at me and I was like, where is my goddamn cart? And nobody was like, they weren't going to make any. I was like, listen, you're not going to steal my fucking cart. Where's my cart? And I finally started just looking around. I'm like, screw it. They're not going to help me. Screw you. I'm going to find the damn thing. And I ended up lifting up the table skirt. And underneath, of course, there's my fucking cart. And as I pulled it out, I knocked a couple things. I don't even know what I knocked off the table. I just pulled it off. I was like,
don't care.
I was like, fuck you. Put my cart up. Walked down the other end of the venue. Started loading it up. Big smile on my face. Didn't care. Of course, I had my mask on. Nobody could have told what was going on. Because, I just got off stage. Like, I don't care shit. Like, everything's cool. Put everything on the cart, and then it starts raining. That was like the absolute worst thing that could have happened, because we were sitting there like, oh, it's not going to rain. Like they said, there's like 3% chance of rain. Well, while we were playing, it went from like 3 to 50, and when we got done, it went from 50 to 100. So it rained while I'm sitting in the tent, like waiting to take because I was just gonna take my stuff to the car. I got an alarm and everything, like, and it's not far enough away I can't hear it. I was going to hang out by the front and keep an eye on my car and hang out for a little bit. Well, it started to rain. I'm like, shit. Then I realized the door I brought my stuff in, it's now closed. And they have a padlock on it. So I'm like, I can't even leave the way I came in. I had to wheel my stuff, big ass cart, right through the middle of this bar that's like 2 feet wide. And of course, everybody's sitting in the aisle.
God.
Oh,
of course they are.
Oh, it was horrible.
They're there for the band.
In fact, my band member's dad and I think it's his uncle. No, it might have even been one of the other members' dads. Now that I think about it, walked me through the bar and was having people move the fuck out of the way for me, because he's like, "This is ridiculous. How are you supposed to get out of here?" He's like, "You can't leave your gear in there because there's no room. Like, it was almost standing room only." So. Which is all another thing. It's COVID and there's people like clustered up. Nobody's wearing a mask and everybody's drunk.
Of course.
So they're all, right in each other's faces and spitting everywhere. Oh, the one thing I haven't shared with anybody else. So we get there and it's humid, and I'm like, man, I gotta get something to drink. So I walked into the bar and I'm like, can I get a water? And the lady behind the bar, the bartender, she's like, well, there's pitchers out there. And I'm like, well, number one, there's no cups. But I said, number two, you think I'm going to drink in a pitcher out of a pitcher in the middle of COVID-19?
Yeah, that ain't happening.
I said, you can give me a fresh pitcher. And I'm like, it's gonna be mine. And I said, ain't nobody drinking out of it. And I said, I will drink it dry by the time we leave. Because, I don't have my bucket sitting here, but I can drink a bucket of water a day.
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
I can finish the soda, and I might ask you to hold things while I can
go get another.
I'll text my son, see if he can bring me one. That's what usually happens.
Yeah. So so anyway, she actually does. She gives me a pitcher, right? And
she should.
Oh, she was pissed about it, but she gave me a pitcher and she gave me a cup. So I went out there and I was like standing around for a minute. I was like, where am I going to put this thing? And nobody's going to find it. Cause like I just, somebody's going to come up and just grab it. Cause it's like, so I ended up I put it on stage with me. Myself to the side, like on the floor. I was like, I hope nobody goes over there. Cause if I kick that thing, it's done for. But it was off on the side. Like, I don't think I was going to be bumping into it. It's actually by a bunch of cables, which is even worse. It's like electrical cables. And there's a giant heater sitting there on the floor. And I'm like, yeah, just put this right behind there. So it was cool. Like, I got everything went well, like, despite all the craziness. And I swear to God, every single gig I go to is this kind of nonsense. Every single one. And we played well. I had a good reaction. I was not in a good mood going into it. Not because of the stuff in the morning, but there have been some behind the scenes things going on that I was just like, but everything turned up roses. Played really weirdly. Cause it's like, if you've ever watched any of the stuff I've ever done, if you've listened to any of the stuff, when have you heard me clean? It's just a whole nother animal when you have to get on stage and I'm basically playing clean ass country music. And, I like to think I'm doing pretty well at it. They're all drunk, but everybody seems to think like, yeah, no, he's doing a good job. I don't think it sounds like country, but apparently it does. So, it was fun. Like everybody was excited. I got paid, which adventures in Venmo. That was a whole other thing this morning. Our band leader texted me, he goes, you want to get paid? I'm like, yeah. And he says, well, how do you want it? And I said, well, we did PayPal last time because it's the only way that worked. And then he's like, can you do Venmo? I'm like, give me 15 minutes. So I go and I sign up for a Venmo account.
You got to make a Venmo account.
Yep. Oh, God. It's just like, dude, just give me cash. Like, just give me cash later. It's fine. It's not, it wasn't even enough money to worry about. I was like, I almost said, just keep it. Don't worry about it. But we did get paid. So I was like, no, I'm not going to devalue myself. I'm worth at least this much. Anyway, so that leads us to the May 8th gig, which is, we're playing a farmer's market. And I say a gig, it's like in the loosest sense of the word, because what it really is it's coordinated busking. So it's a farmer's market, and they have asked us, this is the requirements, and then I can tell you why I'm pulling my hair out. They have asked us to, we've been there before, but apparently usually Kyle just goes by himself, or maybe it's Kyle and two of the other guys. It's not the full band, to do this thing. So basically, you sit on a corner, or actually right now they get you sitting on the steps leading up to where the train comes through, and you play music. There is no power. Now, that is where it gets interesting, because most bands with no power just say, well, hell, we're busking. Let's just take acoustic instruments and do it old school. No, not us, because our band leader thinks that it's much easier to sing, and he's right, with an amplifier. And because of that, I will always be drowned out, because I'm going to be playing my acoustic guitar next to him at this event. So then, because he's going to run his acoustic through his amp, right? And I don't think I can talk him out of that. Now, I'm going to explain a couple things about this, why I could take the easy way out, but the easy way out is also the most dangerous way out. You could buy what he has, which is a die-hard car battery with an AC adapter out. It's a jumper battery. Those things do not put out the correct kinds of power to power an amplifier correctly. What you need is something that has, there's a term for it. It's like parabolic power or something, where it provides power more consistent with that which you would get out of an outlet. Okay. Now, when you're running off a battery, the ground doesn't matter all that much, apparently. But the issue is those batteries have a ton of amperage. If there is any issue whatsoever within your amplifier, and that could be a number of things, you could arc across your heart from a car battery. And in fact, it'll be a car battery that's more potent than a car battery because it's designed to jump them and release that stuff in a very short order. It is dangerous for both your equipment and you if you're not doing it properly with the correct equipment. Those things assume you'll be plugging something like a cell phone or a laptop into it. And I would not recommend you do that either, but it's an emergency use type situation, or maybe even a light, like a an overhead light for your car or something so that you could see while you're working on it. That's what those are for. They are not for powering things like amplifiers, which have high draw. I mean, you're only going to get like 2 hours worth of life off one anyway. If that. I mean, it depends on how what kind of amp it is, how hard you're running it. Now, granted, we're not talking tube amps. At least they're smart enough not to do that. But I would never consider this a viable option. The first time I saw them do it, you can remember we back the show in October. I was like, I was squeamish about it, and I've done more reading up, and it's basically the consensus is it can be done. It may not be the best thing to do. May not be the right thing to do. Now, of course, the idiot in me says I could die playing my conventional amplifier. So plugged into the wall. So should I care? I mean, so anyway, long story short, as I've gone down the path of looking at what other battery powered options I have. Now, here's where things get interesting. If you've never looked at this, it's actually an interesting side of the business because there's a lot of cheap stuff that'll run on batteries that's really not loud enough to compete with full band type equipment. There are also devices that will compete and are fairly inexpensive, but are usually really low on features. So I've initially started, Jim, you know this, I was looking at the Bose S1 Pro, which is like the Cadillac of battery powered PA systems. Now, obviously, I didn't exhaust. I went and looked at amplifiers, but I started out with the Bose S1 and the JBL Eon, which they have a compact portable PA. Now, both of these are like 120 watt systems. I think the Bose doesn't actually publish its feature spec or its features. It's one of their array system units, and they sound really good. And the clips I've heard, it's more clear than its competitors. Like the JBL Eon's very focused. It has a lot of mid-range, but it does not sound clear. It sounds like typical JBL, live speakers, which are not great, but they'll get the job done. And then, so I looked at those and I was like, well, these are cream of the crop. These might fill the need for a PA system later this year because it was something that I was already thinking about. And that's not going to happen. So the Bose S1 system is $600. The JBL Eon is $550. So then I said, well, what hell? I can't spend this on a one-off gig. Like, as much as I think that I might actually have a use for these things, I'm not sure I will. And because of that, that's a lot of bread to throw on something that I'm only using one time. Now, I even thought about it from the perspective I could sell my head rush and use this as a wedge going forward. And I still am kind of thinking about that, which is why the Bose is still on my radar. Depending on what's available, that might be the one I end up ordering because that's where things get sketchy. So I said, well, hell, I can get a battery-powered amplifier. And I've looked at everything from the Fly stuff from Blackstar on up to the more expensive offerings like the Fishman Loudbox Mini Charge. I played a Fishman Loudbox today, and I gotta say, I was impressed. It sounded really, really good. But here's the issue. The Fishman Loudbox Mini charges $500 for, and it's basically their smallest loudbox with a battery.
With a battery.
That's ridiculous. What's the smallest loudbox is only $350. So you're telling me the battery is $250?
Dude, battery technology is still expensive, and that's a rechargeable battery. Rechargeable lithium-ion battery. That's a big battery.
Well, I'm just saying I can buy stuff.
I can tell you this. The batteries, I think you probably don't look at my Facebook page, but the batteries for my mower cost more than the mower with the batteries together. That if I was to buy them separately, I would pay, well, almost as much. And the battery for my weed whacker that I just bought cost $50 less than if I bought the battery with the weed whacker. And so I was like, it was $150 for the weed whacker alone, $150 for the battery alone, or $200 together. No brainer. My mower, same thing. It was $350 for a battery, or $400 for the mower and the battery.
Well, and while I understand what you're saying, I also sort of understand the paradigm of other industries where that, and you can buy batteries and replacement batteries for a lot of this stuff that are aftermarket, that are way cheaper, and sometimes are even more capacity. And the reason being is that this is the printer cartridge thing, right?
Yeah.
Where the cartridges,
it's the whole ecosystem thing.
Yeah, the printer is being sold at a loss, so you can buy cartridges, and the cartridges are being sold at a huge markup because that's the hidden cost, right? And I kind of wonder if that's what's going on with battery technology, but specific to this stuff, I think they saw this as a niche product. They said people will pay the extra $250 to buy one with a battery in it. I think it's only worth $75 more myself. I think it's grossly overinflated because they didn't put it in the big guy Fishman Loudbox. They put it in the mini.
No.
Which is why I'm like, what the hell? Now, granted, I probably would have paid $600 for the big guy, because that makes sense, right? Like it's only $100 more than the big guy is.
Yeah, that's what doesn't make a lot of sense. That big one is really good.
No, and I can imagine. The only thing I think that would probably be better than it is the Mesa Rosetta, which thing is, that's another planet, but it's very expensive. So the alternative was like, well, somebody asked me, said, why don't you just play electric? And I was like, it's an idea. And they said, get a Yamaha THR3 or the 30 watt one. And I was kind of skeptical at first because I'm like, well, these are made for bouncing sound off walls. But actually I read up and there are people using this for busking. So I'm like, well, if it's being used for busking, it must be loud enough to get over something. And I have a friend that has one of the smaller ones. I asked him, he said, yeah, it's really loud. He's like, it's louder than you're expecting it's going to be. And they're battery powered. So I was like, fantastic. And it's way cheaper. And they have an acoustic and an electric mode in it. So I could do either one. So I went to go buy one. I actually waited until I got paid because I wanted to do the responsible thing and not put it on a charge card without the money in hand. And I went to go buy one Thursday, and reached out to Robert Jackson at Guitar Center, and they are out of stock now. So I actually missed my opportunity because I had gotten pricing and almost ordered one the week prior. So now I'm screwed, right? Because last time I checked, Sweetwater doesn't have them either.
Jeez.
So I'm like, well, what do I do now? I'm checking right now, actually, as the show's going on. More on order. And they are not going to be in until probably the end of June. So, because they're made in China, right? And they've sold through the last shipments. So now I'm back to square one. I'm like, what the hell other options do I have? I really don't feel like I should have to spend $600 to get a good PA system for this. So I Googled this evening, and I came up with some other options. And apparently Behringer has a 40 watt all-in-one battery powered PA system with an 8-inch low frequency driver, a 1-inch high frequency driver, and a 4-channel mixer. Bluetooth connectivity, wireless system integration, and a carry handle, plus a 12-hour battery. And The only caveat I can find on this thing is, number one, it's clearly made for being a public address system, i.e., small format, like speaking engagement type stuff.
Yeah.
But there are
Keep
people
your volume
using
up.
it for music, and they said, yeah, it's not the best sounding thing, but it's loud. Like it'll carry over over a parking lot. So I'm like, well, it's in my cart right now. But there are a couple of other ones that are out there too. There's a Samson one, which I have not had good luck with Samson stuff in the past. Roland makes one, which is actually more expensive than the Bose S1, which is just mind-boggling to me. And then actually Behringer makes a couple. They have the Europort. They have the Pro Portable System. I think the Pro Portable System is more in line with their existing PA products, whereas the Europort is clearly like office type speaking situations. And then there's the Mackie Free Play, which is $450. And then you can get into this crazy high end stuff, which I didn't even exist. There's the Anchor Audio stuff, which is like 200 watt like column PA line array stuff. And then there's this thing with like a dolly attached to it. It's a fold out speaker. And these, like, the reviews on them are like, these things sound great. I'm like, what the hell? Who's buying this stuff? Because I've never been to a show where they had a $3,600 battery powered wireless PA system. Like, is there a market for this? I mean, maybe these are like a startup now, and they hope to get acquired. I don't know.
Right now, a lot of churches are doing the parking lot thing, and
it could be. It could be.
There is a battery pack that Fender makes that's actually meant to power the Passport, but
they're almost as much as the wireless PA packages are, though.
Yeah,
that's what's crazy.
And that's just it. And it ain't cheap.
Yeah,
I mean, the fact is that battery technology is freaking million years behind in what it should be, and it's because there's been no.
Is it technology or is the lack of demand in this industry?
The lack of demand in the industry,
and that's the critical part.
Our industry, yeah, it's not just our industry; it's just in the industry in general. In other words, I shouldn't say the industry in general; it's industries in general. What we don't have is a good, like, all right, I need power that I can provide at home on the road, with the exception of cars and vehicles, and now lawn equipment. Lawn equipment has only recently gotten powerful enough with batteries, because it used to be
until you had Li-ion batteries, you were never gonna get enough torque out of anything.
Right. Yeah, you couldn't mow a lawn with it. You wanted a lawnmower that plugged in. Now that's the dumbest thing I could think of in the world, because I know I used to have a small,
you just run over your cable
place, and you can run over your cable. And freaking, I'm thinking, well, there's a good way to kill yourself, mowing the lawn. How did he go? Well, he had trimmed hedges. It's like, it's ridiculous. So Ioxis which is a company I worked for before, did that kind of thing, and they were in the battery industry. And what happens is, truthfully, this is going to sound terrible, but I'm going to give you a little inside information, I guess. I remember we reached out to Shure. This was a long time.
You've said this story on the show before, where you had this.
I did.
This capacitor technology that you wanted to sell to Shure.
So we had this capacitance, and the capacitance could power a microphone for a gig. And Shure said, okay, can you fit it into this? And they said, no, you'd have to retrofit, and they'd have to come up with a way to fit a capacitor in there. Now, this is the thing. This is the thing that Shure said no to. So batteries, which you throw in the garbage, right? Everybody was like, oh, environment. Yeah. Well, everybody talks shit about the environment. Nobody cares about it, believe me. Shure said no, because it would increase the end product value or end product cost by 5 cents or something like that, 25 cents, which would push it above the $99.99 ending, the $9.99 ending that they had. So if you can't keep it under that 1 penny number, This is the logic that we have as, and now it may not be true. I said, you got to be kidding me. Shure can say this is the first green technology. You can literally, this is how fast you could charge your microphones if you were on the road. You'd plug them in, 40 seconds later, they're all charged to the max. And so if you have to change out a microphone, you pass a microphone off and you throw it in the charger. It's done. We were already doing it for flashlights for firefighters and police and things like that. But if the industries in general are not asking for power that can give this much, and that's the thing, it doesn't matter what the industry is. It's a requirement for power to last this long for this much draw, and so that's why the battery for the Fishman is going to cost so much. Because to be honest with you, Fishman's probably paying close to retail for that damn thing.
Well, and that's what's silly about it, right? So like they designed this thing and they take an off the shelf battery, which is exactly what's happening. And whoever's producing this off the shelf battery isn't going to buckle on price. And like, even though it's not necessarily the same technology,
Fishman
as a
won't
capacitor,
ask for enough of them,
right? I mean, I get it. I do get it, but that's, and they can't buy in quantity enough to get the price down, which is really the real reality. Which is why I said the industry just doesn't want this stuff. Like if it did, it would be more commonplace.
If Fishman was putting out thousands of those things a day, that'd be one thing. But they're probably putting out tens of them.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
And it's two reasons. One, it's expensive. Now, as soon as I hate to say it, but as soon as some Chinese company comes up with a knockoff where they can start shoving these things out for $200 or $300 less, we're going to go to talking about that in a minute. So, or a few minutes. That's when we're going to get pushed to that point.
So,
and
by the time this episode airs, this gig will have probably taken place. Because I think it's maybe not. No, I will have a solution by the time this airs, because this should come out on the 5th. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I'm not my plan right now is to get a Behringer cheapo 40-watt system, bare bones. I don't want a microphone or anything with it because a lot of these come paired with a microphone. Bare bones cheapo system, and then use it one time. And if it collects dust, I won't feel bad about it. And I can resell it in a couple of months. Maybe I'll make, a quarter of my money back. But the reality is, like, at least I'll get through the gig. Because there was a little bit of drama. I'll be real. Like, they were talking about bringing somebody else in to do this show. Like, I honestly, this is where things get funny, right? My gut reaction, because I'm a nervous person. I'm anxiety ridden. My gut reaction was like, they're telling me that they're going to hire somebody else. And if they hire somebody else, that probably means I might be out long term. Which I'm like, that was my reaction. But then the other part of me was like, is this a bad thing? And I was like, I mean, not necessarily. It's a different thing. I know I will have more time to work on my music. And I got to thinking, I was like, and this is, if Old Snubby is listening, I apologize, but I don't really spend much time on their music and getting ready for that.
What?
I mean,
you don't need to.
It's not that. We're a party band. Like, why would I take it seriously? You know what I mean? Like, need to. I don't feel like there's real ambition or drive there. And for the $40 to $50 I get paid on a gig, like, it covers my gas money, but actually it covers my gas money than some. My gas money was about $5 to go up there.
Yeah, so, but I don't know how many times you rehearse, but
we don't rehearse.
You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, rehearsing. What's that?
Well, that's
that thing where you guys get together and play, right?
Yeah, once ganja becomes legal everywhere, you don't have to worry about rehearsing.
Yeah.
What? Come on, man. Come on.
We they were all like, it was cool. Like, I'll be honest with you, like, I do like playing with them because it's no hassle, no drama. If something doesn't go right, nobody says anything. Nobody gets super pissy with me. I don't have like angry. Like I did have the last rehearsal. I bombed a couple of things, and it was really funny because what I don't think they realized was going on is like I got all set up, right? I was ready to play, and I got warmed up, and then somebody brought out a pizza, okay, a homemade pizza, and it was sitting on the table, and it was going to waste, and it smelled really effing good. And I've been on a diet, but I'm like, if I'm out in a social, engagement, I'll eat a little bit. So I'm like sitting there with smelling, I'm like, ooh. And so we went to start a song, and I had a piece of pizza in my mouth. And I'll tell you what, I played that entire song eating a piece of pizza. Like, I'd be like playing the rhythm part, and he's like, oh, take a solo, and I'm like, all right, do that thing, and then like I'm still eating this thing, it's hanging out of my mouth, and I'm like, jam it a little bit in there, and then keep playing, playing with one hand, like kind of thing, and then jam a little bit more in there, and I like reached down in the pick, and I got like a crumb stuck between my pick and my finger while I'm playing, and like, this is like legit what actually happened in one of the songs, and I'm still eating, and I'm like. Still playing, as hard as I can and like trying to stay in time and everything. And everybody's rushing and I'm like trying to pull it back. And I'm just sitting there going,
oh my God.
I'm just sitting there going, this is just nuts. Like I'm eating a piece of pizza and playing these tunes. Like what the hell is going on here?
This is the funniest shit.
Well, but that's how it is, right? Like, so that's how this band goes. Like everything is always just a comedy of errors. And then we get to the gig and then I throw down. And it's like, okay. But the funny part is, like yesterday at the gig, I experienced something I've never experienced before. I've never played outdoors in a super humid environment. And my fingers got so effing sticky, I couldn't play. It was like being paralyzed because I was stuck to the fret. I got a satin fretboard, and it's not unfinished, but it was actually not sticking to the fretboard. It was sticking to the strings. And I'm like, oh, this sucks. So literally in the middle of a song, I'm using my shirt to try and wipe my strings off so I can actually play through. And I'm playing all this like oblique bend stuff in like one position because I'm like, I can't go up or down. Like I'm stuck right here. Fortunately, I can eke one out. I can play with a broken string too if I have to. But it was like it was just one of those situations where I was kind of taken aback. And Kyle looked at me because I was standing stage left to Kyle. And he looks at me and he goes, he's the band leader, by the way. Looks at me and he goes, wow. Like, I just looked at him and I said, you don't even understand. Just trust me. We're going to get better. And by the end of the show, he's like, yeah, okay. Cause I resolved the issue by either not sweating or wiping something off or just, powering through it. I don't know, a combination of the above. But it was not like, it was a totally different thing. I've never been through that scenario where it's like, holy hell, I can't even play my guitar because it's like sticky. This is why people have things like that stuff that you spray on your hands or you're on your strings to like lubricate. And I said, next time I'm just going to take some powder. I'm going to get like some talcum powder or something and I'll just powder my hands before I play and it won't be a problem. So, but it was just like, Jesus, I never even thought that would be an issue. Never even considered it.
This is so funny.
Well, I mean, I play guitar gymnastics anyway, Jim. I mean, gymnastics powder, it'll be fine.
You're fine. Yeah, there you go. You could be like a gymnast.
Stand over the side. It's like all this stuff coming off. Now I start playing a solo.
Believe it or not, that when you mentioned that, when I go bowling, my son brings a little ball. That's exactly the same thing. Just do that. I never thought about that until you just mentioned it.
Dry off your hands. I mean, like honestly, it'll
use that for my guitar. Yeah.
Yeah. So if anybody's tried something like that, please let us know in the group.
He keeps it in a baggie in his bag, and that way it doesn't get all over the place.
Yeah. Let us know in the group or the comments below because this is going on YouTube too. I'm curious if you're watching us on YouTube. There's usually a little blurb down at the bottom that says that we put. I want to apologize. It says that we put chapters in the show notes. We haven't been doing that. I just don't have time to watch the entire episode to do it. Yeah. So hopefully someday somebody will put those in the comments.
Tonight, I want to bring something up about that. But anyway, so let's talk about expense and lack thereof.
Yeah.
So, um, we'll probably have a relatively short episode tonight. We started late, folks.
And I'm
It was my
tired.
fault. It was, yeah, me too. You can tell. I I did the bad thing. Look at my face. I went to Taco Bell.
That's why he's ending early, folks.
Yeah, that I might not have a choice.
Taco hell.
Taco smells. So anyway, I was watching YouTube as I do. And again, I'm not a person that I'll be driving down the road and I'm listening to it, not really watching it. And so I'm listening to our Rosano episode, and up comes another thing. And of course, YouTube never cares that I don't ever actually watch Rhett Shaw, but here it comes.
Yeah.
Here's Rhett Shaw. So, and it goes into his 5 reasons to buy an inexpensive guitar. So I'm like, okay, this might be pretty interesting. I'll listen to this.
Yeah.
And
that was the first mistake.
That was my first mistake. Assuming that it was interesting and I should listen to it, because the next thing he does, he goes, yeah, I'm going to a local music store. I don't know as he said the music store out
It's
loud,
probably the one he always goes to.
Yeah, it's this little white building hole in the wall. It looks like somebody's garage. Right?
Oh, no, maybe not then.
And a hand-drawn sign. It's just, and of course, very hipster. So I'm not surprised at all. Goes inside, and he's like, yeah, today we're going to be looking at some inexpensive guitars. We're going to try to stay in the $200 to $400 range. I'm like, oh, okay, that's smart.
So basically Squires.
That's good. Inexpensive. And he goes, but we're not going to look at Squires and Epiphones. I mean, everybody, Squires and Epiphones. All right, so here's 2 things he says in the beginning that he doesn't stick to. 1, $200 to $400. 2, not really looking for Squires and Epiphones. So I'm like, okay, maybe he's going to come up with something different.
Good aid.
And the first thing he does is something different. It's an electromatic Gretsch. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, electromatic Gretsch, under 400? Really? New? That's pretty good. No, it wasn't under 400. It was $450. So the first one is outside of the top of his range. Now, why create a range and then go outside of it right away? So I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I mean, 400 is a little tough to get under, but just say, you know what, we boo-booed with the range. We should have done it.
Yeah. So
his first one, because I want to do a 5 reasons, but let me just get through this thing because I gotta tell you about it. So, his first reason to do it is to save money. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, that's why people buy inexpensive guitars. You're saving money. Shit. All right. So the next thing he says is, oh, these are humbucker pickups and blah 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 on it. Okay. So then he picks up guitar number 2. What's guitar number 2? It's a Squire. And what's also about guitar number 2 that's outside of what he was saying? It's also $450. So he's got 2 guitars, both under $400, both out of the price range. And he gets to the second guitar, and it's a Squire, which he said he was going to stay away from Epiphones and Squires. And of course, it's a Jaguar. We have to go with an offset because it's a hipster guitar. Okay.
I have a theory.
Got to do that because it's the hipster thing. Yeah, me too. But what's your theory, by the way? Go ahead.
All right. My theory is that that Rhett Shull knows so little about the market that he thinks that there are guitars that he would actually enjoy for $300 or for like $200 to $400. And what he doesn't realize is all that stuff that he probably would have enjoyed has crept up in price, and it's now between $350 and $700 because he's so out of touch.
My theory is that's right. My theory is the last time that he had to buy something like that was when mom and dad bought it for him when he was a teen.
Well, I mean, maybe not, but the reality is that stuff's changed since we've been doing this show.
Oh yeah,
remember the Squire price hike? I mean, like people
Yeah, it
are.
was only 2 years ago or something.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Year and a half ago.
even if you were in tune with it 3 or 4 years ago, like you walk into a music store now, you're going to be in a wasteland comparatively.
Yep. And that's something he should have mentioned. Didn't, but that's all right. And then the first thing he says, well, another thing you might want to do is mudding a guitar. That's not a reason to buy cheap. It's a good reason to buy cheap. It really is. Great reason to buy cheap. But he's talking about $450 guitar, so it's already out of that price range. And then what does he do? He says, and you could probably get a mastery bridge and a mastery.
Well, that's $400.
Yeah. He just doubled the price of that fucking guitar.
Yeah. I mean, over time you could upgrade it, sure. But in the meantime, you're going to have to play wound G strings.
He's like this. He goes like this. I had this one here just for this version. He goes, well, see this nut? Yeah, this nut is terrible. These tuners aren't very good. This bridge isn't very good.
Yeah, well, I mean, so like,
why
so like,
did you pick that guitar up?
So if he like said, this nut needs swapping, that's $15, $30 installed.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. These tuners need swapping, that's $50. This bridge needs swapping, that's $100. Now you're already at the point where your $400 investment guitar is at $550. Ask me how I know. Trust me. Ask me in the group how I know. I can point you to a number of episodes that will explain to you about what I did with a Chinese guitar.
So you put your guitar, before you even went to that whammy bar part, at $600.
Yep.
It was $150 plus.
Yep.
Plus the guitar. And even if you got some kind of discount, which you might be able to, you're not going to. Most of these mom and pops are not going to cut you more than a 10% discount. Most of them. I'm not saying all of them. I'm not saying none of them will go 15%. I'm just saying that
on that end of the market, it's peanuts anyways at 10%, 20%. They can give you 30% off, and you're still going to struggle to hit 400.
Yeah. And so now, as I said, so then he grabs another guitar. And I'm thinking he's got 5 reasons he's going to grab 5 guitars. He only comes up with 3. There's a 4th one in the thing. And here's the other thing. Going in to buy a budget guitar, my assistant, I'm like, how many people take an assistant to buy a budget guitar? And what he should have done, the only thing that could have been more hipster and out of touch would have been my assistant, who is also carrying my Starbucks. And
you know he was. You know he was.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
So wait a minute. And let's back up for a second. Let's be real clear here. Rhett Shull is not an A-lister.
No.
He might be a B-lister. I would say he's probably closer to a C on the B side of things, in that range. And he has an assistant.
His assistant.
Let's just what?
His assistant.
Can we unpack that? Are we sure it wasn't his wife, Tilly?
Oh, I'm 100% sure, because the guy's name was Chris. And if it was his wife has gotten ugly and has grown a mustache. But anyway, so because
thanks,
Tilly's, she's
I feel
sweet
so
woman.
good now. I feel really good about myself.
Have you met her?
How does that feel?
Yeah, actually, I've seen Tilly on a few different things.
Yeah.
I want to go talk to that in a minute. But so anyway, I mean, so he's so, like you said, he's so out of touch with it, and he picks up a guitar. It's a Dan Electro, and again, I'm thinking, okay, now he's in the used category. Maybe he's gonna get. So it's a used Dan Electro. What's the price? $399.95. Well, at least he was $5 under that maximum number on his one guitar, but it's used and it's modded to within an inch of its life, and so it's already modded up and it's set up beautiful. By the way, it looked great. I don't know if it was a touch-up grab that somebody did or what. Sounded good. And here's the other thing. This is how out of touch with that market he is. He doesn't take the guitars over and play them through a Spider 5 or through a Katana or through a.
It's a 69 Plexi or something. It's got to be.
He's playing through a 2 Rock.
Oh, great!
with stacks and stacks of he's over in the amp room, nowhere near whatever budget amps they may or may not have.
You're supposed to spend more money on your amp than your guitar.
Oh yeah. I mean, you'd spend that. You could buy a car or you could buy your two rock, and then it's sitting with heads and combos of what amp do you think? What hipster amp? Not two rock.
I don't know about hipster.
Starts with an M. Starts with an M.
Morgan.
Matchless.
Oh, Matchless.
Got a pile of Matchless.
Matchless isn't hipster though, man. Matchless is like
that's the
proto hipster. Like it was before all that, and actually was really popular on stages for a long time before.
Yeah. Didn't they go downhill and come back? Is that the one that
main guy left? Greg Sampson or whatever, he left.
And one came back. Yeah.
And but I know somebody who's really into him. Like he's actually got
anyway. He's playing it in a pile of Matchless, and then he plays one through a two rock. Then he takes another one through a Pro Reverb. So it's like, so you're going to play it through $2,000 amps. The thing that I don't know as people like this, and it's a lot of the YouTube community understands, is play it through something somebody's going to be able to. At the highest end, that Tweed right there that I've got sitting next to me,
which is really just
that's
going
to be
Junior.
The high end Blues Junior.
Yeah,
it is. It's a Blues Junior. It's a Tweed Blues Junior. That's pretty much the quote unquote high end. I've got a Spark right here somewhere. Corner. Not out of the bag like usual. I'm buying a shelf just to put the Spark on, so I at least play it once in a while. I mean, but the thing is that people are like, if you're out and looking for a budget guitar, what are the 5 reasons? And number one, what's your number one reason usually for buying a budget guitar? Not you and me.
Backup.
What's yeah, it's a backup. It's also because you don't have a lot of money. You don't spend a lot of money.
Right.
You
it's
either
a budget.
Don't have it. Right. You're going in on a budget. And if you're going in with $400 or $500 on a guitar, which I still think is a lot, $200 to $400 is a lot, which is why I think these Firefly, you can't even find a Firefly right now.
All right. Let's back up. Yeah. I don't think in today's market, $200 or $400 is really all that much. And here's why. So I'm looking at Dan Electro right now. Take a wild guess what Dan Electro guitars start at. Current Dan Electro models.
$600?
No, they've got some cheaper ones than that, but
okay,
you're not going to want them, and they're $480. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Like that's
500.
Chinese made, like inexpensive Dan Electro copy of their 50 designs. Now, granted, Dan Electro knows who their fan base is, and like these guitars are built to satisfy that group of people. I'm not a Dan Electro fan. I think they have their place, but like I don't have any reason to own one. But that said, like when you read these descriptions, they're freaking hilarious. I just want to share one with you. This is a Dan Electro 57 electric guitar in jade. Semi-hollow body electric guitar with hardwood plywood body. Maple neck, Pal Ferro fingerboard, and 2 single coil pickups. Jade. They advertise the fact that it's hardwood / plywood. Yep.
Well, they have to. That's part of the.
They should just not say anything at all. Yeah. I mean, but that's part of the allure of Dan Electro, right? Is like these are literally the cheapest you can get, and that model I just read off to you is $600. So just put that into perspective. Like when you get outside of Squier and buying power of the companies like Fender and Gibson, who own Epiphone and Squier, like the buying power drops off and it's harder to get quality parts at an affordable price in a well-made guitar. Because I played some of these Dan Electros before, and they're not bad guitars. Actually, most of them are set up pretty well. They sound cool, but the reality is they're made out of junk. I mean, that's essentially plywood and whatever bargain basement kind of metals they can get to put in their hardware and pickups. Now they go all the way up. Now Dan Electro goes all the way up to, I think I saw one in here for 700. Yeah, there's a couple models for 700. Their sitar is 700, which is cool because they brought the sitar back, the Coral sitar.
Yes,
which I wouldn't mind having one of those.
Right, the couple of Dan Electros that are actually kind of okay, that might be something I'd look at. Is their sitar? That's number one. And number two, I would look at one of their baritones.
Yeah, and those are
baritones
right around $500, which is what I think. Like, if you can get under 500, I think this is how Rhett should have looked at the categories. He should have said anywhere underneath $500, and that should have been his cap. And there are plenty of guitars, and I don't care what brand you look at. There are plenty of guitars you can find for under $500 that'll get the job done.
That's right.
They don't have to be cool. Like, he went into this thing with this idea that it's cool or whatever, and it's like they don't have to be. Just, no. I mean, I played some LT or ESP guitars today that were freaking outstanding for, like, I think one of them was $999, which is way more expensive than this. But they had other ones that were way under that price cap that were fine. Like, I could have taken one home and been content for what I was going to do with it. And I that's why I look at this thing. He didn't even give 5 good reasons. From what you're telling me, like, the reasons is just absolute ridiculousness.
His last reason. This is his last reason. He was so. I think he wanted to make a top 5 list, and he was so bad at it. And
he needed the top. He needed the top 5 so he could get it in the search engine. Is what it is.
Yep. So guess what number 5 was? You don't need a bag for it. You could just throw it in the back seat. That was number 5. The reason you buy a budget guitar is so that you don't need a bag or a case. You can just throw it in the back seat and feel good about it. That was number 5. I thought to myself, I said, you actually thought that that's something that somebody would say, you know why I bought a budget guitar? So I could just toss it back here. I knew a guy, I will kid you not, all right? I knew a dude. I hope he's still around. His name is Bob Muro. Really good, really nice guy. Matter of fact, I found the one that he bought today. He got a whole $100 off of it used. It's the Dan Electro 59M NOS Plus Electric Orange Metallic Flake. Anyway,
yeah, I'm looking at that guitar.
Yeah, and a friend of mine used to have an original 70s jazz bass. And when he knew he was coming to rehearsal, he'd just throw it in his trunk. He'd just throw it in the trunk. And he'd come to rehearsal and pull the thing out and just
tune
start
it up.
playing. He goes, you know what I love about this bass? I never have to tune it. It was so used to being treated badly. He really didn't have to tune it that much.
It'd be really funny if you find out the truss rod was broken and 3 of the bolts on the neck were broken.
I'm sure that thing was so effed up. He'd throw it in the back of it didn't matter, 2 degrees outside or 200 degrees outside. That thing was in the back of the car. It was just so no. Rat,
he just leave it in there. Like, he had a nice space at home, but
yeah, it was a stellar bass. But I just thought that was funny. He puts it on he's leaving and he's out of ideas of number 5, and he goes,
yeah,
oh yeah,
basically
throw it on the back seat.
Hey, Chris,
wow, good prep.
Let me show you how this episode started for them. Hey, Chris, is this the same? Is this Chris?
Yeah, Chris.
Hey, Chris, I gotta go to the guitar store and I didn't do a video for today. Why don't you just go with me and I'll look at some cheap stuff and we'll make a top 5. And Chris is like, whatever you say, man.
Whatever, man. Is it legal yet?
Yeah. I don't know if that's, but anyway, so
can we hotbox on the way?
Jesus. All right.
Is it 420 yet?
Jesus. Man? All right. So let's back up. I
do want a Longhorn Dan Electro just for the look.
I
That is the
have.
coolest looking bass. I mean, as far as the
I think they're.
retro look, I love the Longhorn.
Oh, they're disgusting. They're disgusting looking things.
It's
Um,
so funny looking.
yeah. All right. So let's back up. So
Yeah,
since Rhett did this, you think we could do a better job of 5 reasons
I
to buy
think
an inexpensive guitar?
yeah. And let's toss out the first reason, the most obvious reason. All right?
Yeah,
The
budget.
most obvious reason, saving money. That's right. So
Budget.
let's toss that out. Let's toss out budget and let's go with 5 reasons. And one is not, I'm going to throw it in the back seat.
Well, let me come up with one.
All right.
Um, because there are actually legitimately cool budget guitars that are inexpensive that you can get through a gig on. And in some gigs, it might actually be preferable to take a $400 guitar. Like if you've ever played a hardcore show in your life or know what hardcore music is, you don't want to take your Les Paul or, well, I mean, your Les Paul, maybe depending, but you don't want to take your PRS core model to a hardcore show, especially if there's no stage. Like if you're standing in front of people and they're all raging on you, last thing you want is your PRS with you. That is an appropriate show for a Dan Electro.
That's right.
Plus, there's also times where the tones are preferred from a trashy guitar. Like if you're going to play Kashmir, you might want a Dan Electro.
That's right. That's right. So, reason number one from the practical guitarist is because
It's appropriate.
it's appropriate. It's the right guitar.
It's situationally appropriate.
I'm gonna come up with reason number two. It's a guitar you almost never use. It's that one guitar. Like I said, the baritone, the sitar. That's another great reason to have a Dan Electro.
Or a Gretsch.
One of those two. Or a Gretsch. Yep. Or if you can get your hands on them. Fender, why don't you put more of these out? People love them, but the baritones that they did in the Squire thing. But anyway, it's that guitar you use one, maybe 2 songs.
Actually, perfect example is the Bass 6.
Bass 6. Great example.
Because it's
Great
a super weird thing, and Squire put one out.
Yep.
You know?
Another one, Squire. Come on. Give us another one.
That was a genius idea.
Guitars.
That was a genius idea for them to put that as a Squire, because it's like nobody's really going to pay $1,200 or $1,300 from this out of a production line coming from Fender. But Squire, you know, and I'm sure they sold a boatload of those guys. I know people that have them. So that's another thing.
That's right.
So that's two.
That's two.
Let me see if I can come up with another one.
And it can't be throwing it into the toilet.
Probably because you actually like it. And
yeah,
like that's a dumb
Thank you.
Who'd have thought? That's a no-brainer. Like if you actually like the guitar, I have somebody I was talking to the other day, they're talking about getting a Telecaster. And they're like, I want to get like a Mexican Telecaster or something. Yeah. And even an older one or whatever. And their logic was sound, though it's out of the price range of this conversation. The logic of sound is like, well, I really like the guitars, and I don't really see the need or reason to buy a really expensive one. And you know what? That's valid too. That might even be reason 4, because
you can find
like the Telecaster is a perfect example, right?
That's right. If I ever get one, that's probably going to be it. The other thing, like I was talking about, the Dan Electro Longhorn Copper Burst, because I like them. I like the look of it. I think it's cool. I think it's retro. It's the one really cool hipster thing. I go, it's kind of cool and hipster and retro that I would like to have.
I don't know if that's hipster.
And with my assistant and my cup of overpriced coffee, which I had this morning. Okay. And you said because you like it. There you go. That's a great one. That's number 3. Great one. I thought, and number 4, and this one, I've got, this is an easy one. This is a low ball. Thanks for throwing me this low ball, this slow ball. And that is because you want to you want to mess it up.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to relic it, why the hell would you buy a really expensive guitar with the intention of relicking the crap out of it?
You're gonna relic it. You're
Beat it
gonna
within an
mod it
inch
to
of its
within an inch
life.
of its life. You're just gonna take it. You're gonna rip the paint off and take it to your local
Strip it
Corvette
down to just the
dealer.
bridge pickup, and rip all the electronics out of it. You're gonna wire that bridge pickup directly to the output, not even
Yep.
a volume knob.
Yep. You're gonna
People do
sand
that,
every bit of stuff off it. Put clear lacquer on it. Put stickers on it from everywhere you've been. Do stuff like that. It's gonna be your.
cover it in
It's gonna
duct
be your
tape,
guitar. Or electrical tape, Eddie Van Halen style. That's the guitar.
right?
That's the guitar.
Right.
Now, of course, if you have the money, if you have the jack, you might do it to a guitar like this. But most of us are gonna do it to, like I'm modding the PRS behind me.
I have reason number 5, and I think my reason number 5 is really good
Okay, good.
because you're just starting.
Gee, how about that? You're just starting out. Maybe you're not going to be in love
I
with
feel
that
like there's like 5 or
Stratocaster
10 more
like
that we could come up with in like a short period of time. It's like, that's why I said this is a total phone-in video.
That's why I said it's a low slow ball. And the thing about it is, and I wish I wouldn't have looked at these Dan Electros because there really are some cool looking ones. But my point is that we're we're a group of we're a group of people who have so many options. In my day, in your day, even when you were young, you're a lot younger than I am. There were not this many options of inexpensive guitars you could do this to or with.
I think so like when I started, there were definitely a lot of choices, but there were a lot of choices that was like, nah, I ain't touching that. And everybody was like, no, don't touch that.
Right.
So like there was like Samick.
Yeah.
I had a Samick. That was
And
our first
Samick wasn't
guitar. But
terrible.
well, it's because they were making guitars for everybody else at the time. They were in their heyday, right? Before
Yep.
they became Greg Bennett, because they were trying to, they'd already lost their
That's the
hold on the
years.
industry, and they were like, we got to figure this out.
Yeah, those are the years that I'm thinking of that are not bad. The Greg Bennett years.
Yeah, I think they legitimately tried to build a quality guitar during that time. Before that, they were basically like Kort is now. Kort makes decent guitars. I don't think anybody's expecting Kort to be, pro tier, but like it's kind of what I'm talking about. So when I was a kid, most of the beginner guys I knew were buying not Squires but Mexican Fenders, and because they were only $350.
Yeah,
and that's not used, that's new. Okay, and this isn't that long ago. This is like 2000, right?
yeah.
And you could bump up, and this is the reason that people were doing that. Fender had a really, really good strategy.
Yep.
You buy the Mexican one, and if you get good enough and you play hard enough, going from the Mexican guitar into the American Standard was like $400 price difference. It's peanuts comparatively, right? Like compared to what it is today, where that buy-in difference is much more noticeable, because it's even the Mexican guitars are hitting what, $700?
Some
I think
of them are
now.
over $1,000.
Well, yeah, but the base model, like what you would consider the standard, is like $700.
Something. Yeah.
I mean, it's literally double what it was in 2020. And I've heard people say, like, well, with inflation. Listen, the value of the dollar has not doubled. We have not had double the amount of inflation. There is definitely some tomfoolery in their pricing. And it has to do with the fact that they put better pickups and better hardware on these guitars from when I was younger. Because the joke was, when you bought a Mexican Standard back then, it was like, well, just rip the pickups out, change the bridge. Now we talk about doing that with Squires, right? And like a lot of people just keep their stock Mexican electronics, and the reason is because the stock Mexican electronics aren't as bad now. They were pretty abysmal when I was younger, but like I can remember I had an American Standard not too long ago that was stock that I ripped the pickups out of because it sounded like crap, and it was 2003, 2004, I think. like it was in that era. So just keep it in perspective, you know? Like back when I was a kid, you bought Fender or you bought Epiphone. And a lot of people were dabbling in Squier as beginners, unless your parents bought you the Strat Pack.
Yep.
Like that was common. Nobody was buying Telecasters. Like not in my age group. They were all wanting Strats. Most of them wanted fat Strats, or they were wanting Ibanez's. And Ibanez's were super popular. And that was before. So they had cheap RGs. That was before the Geo line. You could buy an Ibanez RG for
I still wouldn't touch a Geo. You can't give me a Geo.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're like the worst thing in the world. They're much better than their budget line was when I was, because I had one of their budget destroyers, which was the Millennium Edition or whatever, the cheapo one. It was in candy apple red, and that guitar, like it was so fake feeling. Like the nut was the cheapest plastic you could get. The board was rosewood, but it was like bright, shiny rosewood, which was weird. And then the neck was satin, but it wasn't thin satin. Let's just put it that way. And the body paint looked great. I had a great, gorgeous, like candy apple red sparkle. And the hardware looked okay. But I can remember the first time I used a screwdriver to adjust the bridge, the tailpiece height. It left marks in the tailpiece screws. And kind of wore away some of the nickel plating, and going, well, that was cheap. And the pickups weren't adjustable pole pieces, you know.
I did a calculator for January of 2000 to now, and a $350 guitar should only cost $550.
Yep.
Which, if we went just a couple of years ago,
that's what they were
costing. You could get a Fender Player Series for $550. And then they went to 6-something, and now they're up over 7.
Do you know why? Do you know why the Mexican guitars are more expensive now? I can tell you why. Sure. Because the Squiers had to get better in quality. And because the Squiers got better in quality, they had to shift the pricing model across the board. If you want to stick it to Fender, the best thing you could possibly probably do right now is buy a Squier. And go to the cheap Squiers, like Affinities and that kind of stuff. Because they're probably just barely making 20% margin on those. And they're making all that margin back on the Mexican stuff because their costs haven't really changed on those. They're just, they're marking them up to make more money on to get more players in the door. Because I have a feeling there's market research there. If you started with a Squier, chances are you'll stay in the Fender line all the way up to, you know, if you do become a pro or whatever.
That's the idea. It's just like when they used to give when I was younger, Apple would give schools apples.
They still do that.
And the whole idea was so that if you started on an Apple, and this is back, I mean, literally they were Apple. I mean, it
didn't work with my generation. A lot of us went PC anyway.
Yep.
But they weren't giving them away. They were making them so cheap. It was like you couldn't resist buying the Mac. I mean, that was
So now a Fender Player Series is $809. $800. Yeah. I mean, they're on sale right now for $650, and that's a big deal. I remember them being on sale last year for over $100 less. They were in the upper $400 category. The exact same guitar. Not even anything different about it. There's no new pickups. There's no new wood. There's no new neck. There's no new tech. There's no new anything except now versus a year ago. So I'm taken aback. I'm blown away by how much, I mean, that's a plus top. But still, $750 for a regular old player Strat. I don't get it. I don't get it. And is there such a thing as a Fender Player's Telly? I don't know. But and like you said, if you go into the American guitars, I mean, a Performer is still $1,200.
Yeah. Which, honestly, if I was Fender, I would be I would want my mid-level offering on the lower end line to be around 600, and I would want my high-end guitar to be right at 1,000.
They're pushing Squires to $600.
Yep. Which is
what
I think some of that's, we've established dominance in the industry, and so now we can just start price hiking Squire, which is funny to me, but like there's no real reason for them to price hike. I mean, the guitars were the same as they were last year. Why would they be going up in price? It's not as though Core Tech had to implement new machinery, or that there's been some sweeping quality control issues that they have fixed. There's really no reason for it other than cost of living increase, which I don't know how that applies to the third world where they're having those guitars produced.
Exactly.
So here's a question, and this is one interesting for the group and something to ponder. You can talk about it in the show notes below. What is making Fender the most money? And just some things to keep in mind as you ponder this question is Fender has gotten so diversified in the last 5 years. They have Fender Play, which is their online service, their subscription online service. They have now blurred the lines on their production lines for Fender. Squire is creeping up in price. And on top of that, they have diversified lines. They have the custom shop, which nobody even thinks about anymore. But they have this $3,000 plus line of guitars that's stratospheric. They have the acoustic line, which includes the Acoustasonic. They have the build your own service. I forget what they're calling it. Their fingers are spread out real wide right now. And my question is, what side of the business do you think is allowing them to grow this way? Because I'm not going to pretend that every line that they have is working and is making them a ton of money. I have a feeling most of them are probably stinkers, and there's 2 or 3 things that they're doing right that are allowing them to experiment. Because that's usually how it works. So it's just I'm just curious what people think is working over there and what isn't, and that's part of the reason why I'm asking the question. But Fender Play, right? So that excited their investors a lot. Because it's well, now we have this subscription service. So even if you don't buy guitars from us, you'll still spend $5 a month to pretend you're learning guitar. And I say pretend because we know what a subscription service is. It's like going to the gym. You get the gym membership. You go regularly. Most people go regularly for a couple weeks, and then they forget, and then they don't start going anymore. And then they have to let the 12-year timer run out, or the 12-month timer run out before they get canceled. And that's kind of what I think is they're aiming for with the subscription model, is this idea that you bought the guitar, we'll give you 6 months free or a year free or whatever it is they give you free. And then after that, you're going to be obligated to pay. And then it allows people to buy in, and get into this world. And I think Fender actually wants Fender Play to make people want to buy more Fenders. So for them, it's kind of we'd almost rather just give it away to people who buy our guitars free, lifetime free. And I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see that at some point. Buy a Fender, get free lifetime Fender Play. Put in your serial number kind of deal. And then you'll see there'll be a piece of tape on the serial number when you buy them from the store. Because they don't want anybody to know what their serial number is until they get it home. And that'll be your activation code for Fender Play. Or you'll get it activated at the counter. But the reason why I say this is because I could just see that happening, because they really just want to use that as a service to drive people to buy more Fender guitars. I mean, that's what that's about. It's there. I don't think, and maybe they are probably making good money on $20 a month subscriptions, but I don't see that sustaining them. They spend way more than $20 a month on whatever they're getting for their subscriptions. This isn't Netflix or Disney Plus.
I think what's keeping Fender alive is just, okay, we talked a lot about one thing, and that is, look, it's a lifestyle.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is it the lifestyle products? That's the other facet that I didn't mention, but
I think it's a lifestyle brand.
I think Fender, they want the lifestyle products to run the company. I think they think that lifestyle will take over eventually and be providing them a massive amount of income. But I suspect right now, even though that like your hat you're wearing right now, that was probably $3 for them to produce that, if that.
Probably.
And it with shipping and marketing and getting it to the stores. And so for them, like, that's all gravy. If somebody spends $20 on a $3 hat, that's $17 in their pocket.
That's right.
You know, you don't have to sell as much to make that work.
Right. Well, right. So what I'm saying is, I don't think it's, I don't know if it's the lifestyle products they want to carry them, because a lifestyle product will only carry you so as far as people care about Fender guitars and amplifiers.
Well, yeah, right. So they still have to provide a product that makes people buy the lifestyle product. So those
Right.
ecosystems feed themselves.
Right. And it's an ecosystem. I mean, I'll never forget the first time I heard somebody say a Fender sounds best through a Fender. And yet I was like, well, wait a minute. I remember Jimi Hendrix playing through a Marshall. But so there is an ecosystem. That is.
So here's the challenge, right? Fender existed long before the lifestyle products did. So is there an ecosystem? Yeah. I mean, I know there is this symbiotic relationship, but without the guitars, the other side ceases to exist. But the guitars can keep the company afloat regardless. They have. Which is why I'm sitting there kind of like, I think they're secondary. I understand what you're saying, and I actually kind of agree with you. I just think that the lifestyle products is like this avenue they're going down because they can see that being very lucrative. So like, look at we got to remember who else that their major investment firm owns. Harley Davidson, right? Yeah. And Harley, like, it's pretty clear at this point that Harley Davidson is making money off motorcycles, but the vast majority of their income comes from their leather jackets.
Oh yeah,
and their T-shirts and all the other paraphernalia and the shot glasses and
Oh my God, you've got no idea. When you get deep into it, oh my God, everything from boots to jackets to I have all my lifestyle stuff from when I was a Harley rider.
Well, we had a Harley store come into our local mall here, and it was funny because I was like, wait a minute, they're selling motorcycles? And then I walked in there and I was like, there's not a motorcycle in that store. Like, what the hell?
Just jackets and hats and T-shirts and shot glasses and playing cards and
it's like, wait a minute. This is a motorcycle company. Yeah. Where are the goddamn motorcycles? They got one in a glass case up front.
Yeah, those are down the street. Yeah, it's a real thing. But what I was saying is, if I can get people to recognize Fender's name and Fender's thing, then when they walk into a guitar store, the typical person that walks into a guitar store is going to ask for one of maybe 2 or 3 brands. We've talked about this before. So, and it's more likely they're going to talk about 2.
Yeah, it's Fender or Gibson.
Goes. Fender or Gibson. When it comes to the the amps, they're going to talk Fender or Marshall. And so most everyday people, that is the thing. So what keeps them alive? I think that as long as they can keep people interested, and here's where they're not necessarily they're failing. The system has failed them. They increased their prices probably because they've been waiting a long time to do so. And now all of a sudden, and we've talked about this even today, there's all these guitars that are on Amazon, for sake, that are $200 and under, that are looking exactly like,
and they're totally marketed towards people who don't know any better.
That's right.
Which, Ryan Burke is trying to dispel that myth and pretend like, all that stuff's really great. And it's good to a certain point, but like they're not, it's misleading. You know what I mean? It's telling people that they're something they're not in some way, because you're trumping up saying, it's worth $200. Well, but if you don't know what $300 gets you from a mainline guitar, like, how are you going to be able to disseminate that? What that actually means?
And Donner is doing a great job of this. Donner, the company that make budget low price stuff. Now, if you look up Donner, they're making pedals. I don't think they're making any of this shit. I think they're branding. They're branding pedals. They're branding power supplies. I have a friend who's using a Donner power supply. Um, and when I looked up how much he paid, I was like, "What for
Yeah,
an isolated power supply with 8 outputs?
isolated.
$150?" I know. And then, he's got, or they've got bases, and you know what they've got for if you watch go to Amazon. Everybody, go to Amazon. Look up Donner. Just stick it Donner, Blitzen, Comet Cupid. You know,
DONNER.
yep. Look it up and then watch the little video, and you'll see a band that's obviously syncing. They're not. They're miming, which hey, everybody mimes, right? They're obviously miming. They're, but there's a killer tune, some cool kids, and they're all surfing and they're skateboarding, and they're really cool and they're hip and
This is embarrassing to hear you say that like they're really cool and hip and describe them that way. I'm like, no,
yeah,
they're not.
yeah, I know that's it. But and they're good looking and they're men and women and they're enjoying themselves, which is all good. Don't get me wrong. It's a beer commercial for fucking guitars.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
It's literally Michelob Ultra for the guitar player. The thing that it doesn't scare me. I think I'm thinking about taking the plunge in a Donner just to see what it's like. I mean, I spend that much money on steak.
I mean, they have some interesting products. Like their wireless thing is just an XLR plug.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of market disruptors in the wireless community right now. There's Nux. There's who's the one that you've got? The
X5.
X5. Boss has theirs now, which I'm using and I actually like. I did not use it at the gig yesterday. That's worth mentioning. And then they have like these like converters for lights, and Donner's doing some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah. I was shocked.
All right, so I'm gonna drop a bomb on you.
But they're selling everything: guitar,
yeah.
piano, drum.
It's just like Behringer. Okay, so I'm gonna drop a bomb on you. So you were talking about people coming into the store and like Fender and Marshall and Fender and Gibson like being the brands that everybody sort of knows. Do you know what's really funny? When I was a kid and I went into the guitar store, do you know the logo I looked for was Peavey, and it was because I can remember, I could even in like 2001, 2000, 1999-ish, I can remember seeing Peavey advertising in the 80s and early 90s, specifically the stuff promoting Eddie Van Halen. And also like, you know, because everybody in the 80s used Peavey. And the country bands were still using Peavey. And like, I can remember the electric, like the lightning bolt logo and being like, Peavey is another brand that's worth buying. And when I bought my Peavey Rage, which was my first like real guitar amp, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I had a Brownsville before that and I had a keyboard amp before that. When I bought a Peavey Rage, my parents were kind of like, well, we know the Peavey name, you know, like Peavey's good stuff. Like we know musicians using Peavey, and they weren't wrong. I mean, it's noisy. That maybe not the perfect design, but realistically, not bad stuff either. Right? And so like I look at that now and I kind of laugh about it because I'm like, the generation before me only had Fender Gibson, Fender and Marshall, right? And for me it was like, there's Peavey, there's Marshall, you know, Ibanez was another brand that I was familiar with when I walked in to get my first guitar. The brands I didn't know were like Samick. I knew Yamaha too. That was another brand. And it was like, so I think it just depends on your exposure. And I think it also depends on the context of what you grew up in. I knew Ibanez because all the bands I was listening to were playing Ibanez guitars. And I just like knew the logo, and I sort of knew like, oh, Ibanez. I knew how to spell that. But I didn't know like what they were. I didn't know, that they had about their heritage and legacy or any of that. About the precursory knowledge most people have when they buy their first Fender Strat or when
Mhm.
they buy their first Epiphone Les Paul. You
Yeah.
know, I just
I
thought it was worth
I
mentioning. Just different context, different age.
Yeah, I come from a weird time because I've said before, I'm the end of the baby boomers, right? Um, so I was born in May of '64. That was the last year of baby boomers, by the way. So people who say, "Hey, boomer," it's a little difficult, a little disingenuous because I don't really fit into either one of
Boomer
the,
is a
the
state of
categories.
mind.
Right. And here's the thing. So as I was growing up and coming into my own, think about it. There were the Beatles, and there was the Stones, and there was um, uh, a lot of AOR. We're moving into um, the Zeppelin, and of course Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Peter Frampton, and but there was also Devo, who was doing their own thing. I mean, they were for the weirdos like myself. And um, if you ever watched an early Devo thing, you'll see that they didn't care what their guitars were made of. They ripped them to pieces and did whatever they wanted. But the point is, um, so I grew up Saturday Night Live. I'm old enough to watch the first Saturday Night Live, right? I watched it live. Uh, Mork and Mindy, all that stuff. So, but the point is, Saturday Night Live was really, and Fridays was a show very similar to that. Was the first time that you could actually watch the bands live on regular old ABC, NBC, CBS that was outside of Lawrence Welk, that was outside of Bandstand, American Bandstand, which we watched on Saturdays or Sundays. It was Soul Train, that kind of thing. We got this, we got exposed, and Fender and Gibson and Rickenbacker, obviously, and Fox made a made a big push to get their stuff on television. They didn't care if the band actually used that stuff. They were like, "No, no, play our stuff, play our stuff, play our stuff. Here's our stuff." Smart moves. And look at what Fender's doing now. Gibson's doing the same thing. Play our stuff, play our stuff. Here, take some. We'll do a video with you. We'll do this high budget, really nice video where you sit down and you talk about how you grew up loving our stuff. We don't care if it's real. We We just want you to say it was, and it could be. I'm not saying that these videos are fake. My point is, so when I walked into a store, bless you,
Thank you.
unless nobody heard of any of the budget stuff that was sitting in that store, and you only heard of the big stuff.
Like Tokai and
Um,
that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah, Tokai, and there was Ibanez. There was because remember, I'm a teenager. The lawsuit era guitars were
Yeah, and
out.
at that time, I'm sure
It's
you
the
heard people calling
mid
them
'70s.
Ivanhad.
Yep. And, I mean, you know, we had a lot of names for the different things that yeah,
Well,
Ivan had.
but so
Yep.
so like before there was Tisco, brands like
Yep.
that, and I'm sure you're familiar with Tisco and Silvertone and
Oh, yeah.
all the stuff like that. And the reason why I bring it up is because like so the Tisco Silvertone stuff was not it could not touch what was being produced here at that time.
That's right.
They're kind of junk. If you've ever played a Tisco, like if you played a good one, then you're like consider yourself of winning
Lucky.
having won the lottery. Uh Hagstrom was another company that had like awful stuff. Um and the funny thing is when you get into the 70s, like the early 70s, then you've got like lawsuit Ibanez's and stuff, and people hated those guitars. They made so much fun of them. They had names like Ibanhad and stuff like that. But you know what the funny part is? Those guitars were great. Even now,
Yeah, a lot of
people
them.
actually like seek those out because they're really good guitars most of the time.
Yeah.
And I was looking at Ibanez Roadstar online the other day, and I was like, "Hey, and the Shin, I think is it Shingo Jockey Factory or whatever.
Yep.
which was actually producing Ibanez guitars. Ibanez is an imprint. It's a branded design that they
That's right.
use, but like this Toshido Shingaki factory is actually what builds
It
them.
was actually the one who did it. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
they were building like several fake lines like Tokai and Global and a
yep.
couple of these other companies. But
Yeah.
the Greco, right?
Yep.
And the funny part about this whole shenanigans is like everybody pissed on those guitars when they came out. Nobody wanted them, and now there's this whole market for them because they're dirt cheap. But the
Yep.
reality is they're on par with what. So like at that time, think about it. What do you got going on in the guitar world? Fender's
That's
producing the
right.
shittiest stuff of its legacy, and
And
Gibson is
Gibson is
following suit.
producing shit, garbage, a lot of garbage. And I laugh now when I hear about all these people. One day they're, 10 years ago, if you said that you had a 74 Les Paul, people would laugh in your face. Now they're like, oh my God, I want one of those. Um,
Well, but just
I,
like age makes everything
but
everything desirable too. But the reality is, the
exactly.
guitars are
I mean,
junk.
and there's a certain amount of, oh, I was born in 74, so I want one of those,
Yeah,
those of
that's
you who
one
are
thing. Like I get that, or
lucky
they have the
enough to be
nostalgia for the
that young.
guitar they had when they were a teenager. Like I get that.
Yeah. I was uh I was watching a channel that talked about the history of Squire. I thought it was really interesting. And one of the things that the history of Squire was very famous for making violins. And they were on par with Stradivarius. And some of their violins go for as much as $100,000. Just to let you know, we're talking about the same company, by the way. Now, what happened was Squire saw a market that nobody else had: strings. Strings were being made overseas, gut strings for gut instruments. So, to get strings for the classical instruments, Squire was like, wait a minute, we can make them right here in Michigan. So, that's what they did. They made their stuff. Squire was an American company,
Yep.
people.
Yep.
And what happened was Leo Fender, towards the end of the second guy that was in charge of Squire. Squire started in the 1800s. So you've got the second guy who's going to pass on. Fender comes in and says, "Hey, we want you to make our strings." So guess who made all the Fender strings right into the 70s?
But that also is why they
Fender
acquired.
branded.
But that is why they acquired them, and they
That's it.
reused their brand name
That's it.
because they needed a name for the line. They
Yep.
didn't want to do what Gibson did, where it was like they wanted it to be Squire by Fender, which is like a little different thing. So they actually used another brand name they acquired. They actually owned several at that point. They owned D'Armand,
Yep.
and because they bought D'Armand, I think, for pickup production. And I think
Yep.
he was just trying to, if I recall, the story goes, he was trying to acquire the pickup winding machines they were using.
Yeah.
Um,
Something like that.
something like that. Because they had some, like,
Yeah.
D'Armand did actually have some really unique pickup designs that are sort of Gretsch reminiscent.
Yeah.
Which he
Another
he
company
had a running
we
feud with
didn't.
Gretsch.
Yeah. Another company we didn't mention that really got popular in the 70s, as a result of Cheap Trick, and that's Hamer.
Yeah, but
And,
the Haber started off as a one-off custom shop. That was
yep.
a weird thing, but like that's a brand that just basically fell through the floor now. And you can buy
Yeah.
Hamers. Hamers are expensive though, because there is a
The old
collector's market
ones.
for those. Yeah, like if
Yeah.
you look for
Um,
chaparrals and stuff like that, you're gonna
same
pay.
Yeah, same with the old, BC Riches, and we talked about those
Bernie
before.
Rico,
That was
BC
another.
Riches.
Yep, Bernie Recall, 'cause those were the real thing. They're not the rebranded crap
You
that.
know, and even the stuff like I would say like late '80s, pre 1990, because they got acquired by another company, and then they went to hell. Basically, is what happened. But when they were right before that transition, like right after Bernie left the company, they weren't
Yep.
bad. They have a
No,
bad
no, no.
reputation, but I have a feeling
Yeah,
this
but
is
they
the same
weren't
thing as
bad.
like Shingaki, right? When
Right.
when that lawsuit happened, everybody didn't like those guitars because they
Right.
were a knockoff. And that's really what it was. It came down to brand name recognition, not merit.
Yep.
It came down to
That's
brand
right.
name recognition.
That's absolutely right. When you're talking about the Gibson Les Pauls that were sandwiches, I mean, we were laughing earlier about the Dan Electros. Come
Yeah.
on. That's
What
what the 70s
70s,
Les Pauls, a lot of
and
them.
they were, basically around the same price
Plywood.
with inflation as they are now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If you can imagine paying $2,500 for plywood, like
Yeah.
people should have been writing their Congress people. I mean, it was just nuts.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of inflation in the '70s though. So I think that may have played into that. I think people were willing to accept less because
Yep.
inflation had gotten so bad.
Oh my God. Yeah, folks, just to put something in perspective for you, when I became an adult and I was going to buy a house, people were like, no, 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 rent, 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 rent. And I said, why? And he said, because believe it or not, mortgage rates were upwards of 13%.
Yeah,
I mean,
gas crisis.
imagine, yeah, yeah. And as I grew up, gas prices that was the first time gas broke a dollar.
Yeah,
And, so it was terrible. You'd go to buy a car and your interest rate was upwards of 27, 20, but you were lucky to get like a, 20% interest rate, at certain points. It There was no work, um, for a lot of people. I mean, I went into service because the choice was to go to college to get a degree you weren't gonna be able to use, or go into the service, at least make a little bit of money. So yeah, there were a lot of things uh, that were in flux at that point. And also remember, um, we're talking about the '70s. That was when companies that knew nothing and didn't care about. I know a lot of people are going to go, "Well, Leo Fender didn't play guitar." Yeah, I know, but he did build
he
amplifiers,
had plenty of
and he
players helping him.
did. That's exactly right, and he did go out and he talked to people like James Burton and those folks, and asked for their opinion and listened to their opinion and integrated their opinions. Um, and the same with Gibson. They had musicians on in. Um, I was just listening to a thing about Vox and the history of the wah, and how he jokingly said, "Well, why don't you just put Clyde McCoy on the?" And they did.
Well, like Dick
He was a washed up trumpet player. He jokingly used his name. He goes, "The only reason I knew who Clyde McCoy was because my brother had had an album with Clyde McCoy playing trumpet on it."
well, like
He
the
was
reason
he
for
was
some of
joking.
the amplifiers that exist from Fender, like the Super Reverb, is Dick Dale
Yeah,
because he
yeah,
couldn't get loud enough. Like he kept going back to him, like no, more, more. And I believe the first Fender Twins were designed for him. And like you think about that for a minute, like that's player input, and
yeah,
he was so people have this thing that Leo was like super involved in the guitar side of the business. He was more over on the amplifier side. He was interested in guitar electronics. He was way into pickups. Um,
yep,
he was an engineer, so like he liked looking at things like when George Fuller would bring him like this is the tremolo system I want to use, and he'd say, well, what if we did this, and they'd work together on this stuff. But most of the guitars outside of the Telecaster, those were
yeah,
other people that were designing those guitars that Leo was helping, or that like he was a 50-50 process. It was a collaboration. So that's interesting to
yeah,
think about. Was like, oh yeah, he didn't play guitar, but he had. I'm sure George Fullerton probably knew a few chords, and I don't buy that
yeah,
Leo never played a guitar either. I have a feeling that Leo picked it up over the years and would pick up guitars from time to time and play a few things,
right,
but he was
right.
not. He was not a player. Like he wasn't a Paul Reed Smith. Paul Reed Smith has a band. Like
Yeah, Paul Reed
that's a
Smith is
thing.
quite good on guitar. But yeah, looking at, again, Gibson, they had Tim, or McCarty, um, and, they had Les Paul for a while, um, and they listened. I think what happened to both of them, because you were talking about that, and I was remembering how Marshall, it was like, same thing with the Who. Uh, Pete Townsend was like, "I need more," and so then the bass player, "I need more," and they just went back and forth. And
I could do a whole show on the
oh yeah,
differences between that way that Fender and Marshall solved those problems. Though it's really funny because they
yeah, I
took
think we should.
totally different approaches.
Yeah, I think we should talk about that next week. Seriously, write that down for next week,
Yeah,
because that is an interesting approach to the way that they went about getting more. Um, anyway, uh, here's what happened though. for those who don't know the history, both companies were purchased by exterior companies. I guess at the time, I didn't know that Leo was sick. I guess he needed to get out of the business for a little while. But anyway, Fender was sold to CBS, right? That was the CBS years. And Gibson was sold to Norlin. Norlin. And so um, companies that come in and do this, they're not interested in making better instruments. They're not interested in listening to musicians. They're not interested in doing things the right way. And what I mean by the right way is the improved to bring the instrument forward. They reversed the instrument. They started making them cheaper materials, cheaper work flow, and unfortunately, when you do that and you say, you know what, how much were we paying so and so to be on the, Dick Dale or whoever to help us out? Oh, screw that. He's helped us as much as he's going to help us. The guitar is as good as it's ever going to be.
They
We're
decided
just
they
gonna.
knew better.
That's right. That's exactly what I was saying.
And
that allowed
that's how you ended up
companies.
with linear power stages and stuff like that. That was a terrible idea.
Yeah,
Terrible.
yeah. It, it's how it's how come companies like Ibanez and
Mesa
those companies
Boogie.
could run right past them. Mesa Boogie's a prime example.
Yeah. Ran right past them to the point that Fender's biggest competitor in the marketplace snapped them up the opportunity that they saw.
Yeah.
And that's and it's one of probably the most controversial acquisition I've seen in the music industry since I've been playing guitar.
Decades.
There's people still bitching about it. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's going to go on for years. And I've seen more shit posted on the internet of people that don't know a damn thing about anything and heard something from some dealer that didn't know anything about it either.
Right.
I heard one guy saying their dealer was blowing out their Mesa Boogie stock because Mesa was pulling the plug on their dealerships. Mesa's
what?
not okay. Let me back up. I have a reason why this dealer said this. They want out of Mesa Boogie because for whatever reason, whatever market they're in, they're probably sitting on a ton of inventory and they know they can't get out of Mesa Boogie's pricing. So they just said this to it. I'm holding up one of my fingers if you can guess which one.
Yeah.
they held up the finger and they said, no, we'll just pretend like Mesa's screwing us. And that way our customers won't think we're spineless.
That's right.
And we didn't do something stupid. And then and then people can think they're getting a great deal because Mesa's, changing. It's like it's a psychological warfare tactic that some mom and pop thought was a good idea. And
that's right.
And then it's being posted on the internet like this is scientific fact. And you can also find situations where, like, I heard something today. Well, because Mesa is now under the parent company of Gibson, they're switching away from using British vintage 30s. They're switching away from using British vintage 30s.
No one
ever anywhere has said that. There is no cabinets coming out with Chinese made Celestians in them. It's just not a thing. Unless you order a different speaker from them than what comes in them stock. Okay?
That's right.
Like,
that's right.
I don't understand why people just immediately think that the worst has happened, and this has been a thing for now, 3 months?
Yeah,
and people are just like, oh my God, it's so horrible. Listen, I know some of the Mesa Boogie guys around here locally that are like the big buyers. They buy a lot of the stuff that comes through our local dealer. And I'll be honest with you, none of them are in any fear right now. They're all like, well, maybe they'll sit on the shelves longer and maybe some deals will be had. Like, that's kind of, they're like, we're not going to say anything because in fact, one person in particular I talked to is like, I wouldn't really want to say anything about it because if people are panicked and they're like, oh, the quality's gone to crap, it just means the price is going to go down. And it might mean that, it might not. But the reality is, like, that's the kind of attitude that some of these guys have. Is like, we're not gonna stop this misinformation from going around.
Oh, hell no. And let those used prices start skyrocketing because, "Oh, I gotta get an older one because I can't buy a newer one." Um, you know what? Again, like you said,
I saw.
I've
Okay,
talked to a lot of people.
you're right, and I'm not gonna. I didn't want to cut you off, but I just you said something that, like, I just went, oh, holy shit, I should talk about that. I saw somebody post on Facebook Marketplace the other day a Mesa Boogie triple rectifier for $10,000, saying pre Gibson, and I'm like, I looked at it for a minute, and I went, this isn't
It's
even.
gotta be a troll post.
I was like, this isn't a desirable one. Like, this is like one of the ones that's like they go for like $1,000 because they were like the middle revision that wasn't any good.
Yep.
And I was just kind of like, wow,
It's gotta be a troll.
you're brazen as shit. Like,
Yeah.
and if he's not a troll, like, he's getting some people are commenting on that, like, you idiot, like,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, you should share that with Fluff so he can put it on his, ridiculous.
No, I think I talked about it on our show, since that was our
Oh, you
bit
did?
first.
Yeah, and it was our bit first.
It's not like he's
speaking of
aware
which-
of us.
Speaking of which, I gotta show you this one while we're
I'm
talking.
happy flying under the radar. That's me.
I was on, Facebook Marketplace today, and I gotta show you this bass guitar that showed up. So, locally, guys selling a PV Millennium bass guitar.
Which are decent
So I'm
guitars.
like, "Yeah, it's alright." 5-string PV Millennium. Wait till you see the picture.
Those were
It'll
active.
be easy for me to find. Huh?
Those were active basses. They made
Yeah.
is that's a 5-string version because they made 5 and 4s.
Yep. It's
Modern
5-string.
body style. It was like walnut, I think.
Well, wait, you'll see.
Oh,
That's
Jesus.
where it gets funny. Oh shit, I should have saved it. Come on, where is
I'm
it?
afraid of what he did to it. Just tell us.
No, it's not something he did. It's
Oh.
the picture itself. This is what's hilarious.
Well, you're not gonna be able to show that on your phone on the show. Nobody's gonna be able to see that.
I'll just turn it around. Here it is. There's the picture.
Oh,
Yeah, that's the picture.
that's a hell of a
See the
Millennium
picture?
bass.
Can you see the picture? Oh yeah, don't
That's-
miss it. Don't blink.
They're selling
That
meat?
is the picture. That's not even.
This is slavery.
He said, you know what he said? He went, used a couple of times, sat in storage since first come, first serve. Or sat in storage since. He doesn't know how to use
Conjunctions,
punctuation,
periods,
so-
punctuation.
yeah. It says used a couple of times comma, sat in storage since first come, first serve, period. He's definitely 420 capable.
I would
Don't
respond and be
currently
like,
have pictures. Don't currently have pictures.
I would respond and be like, "Are you a robot?"
Don't currently have pictures. I'm like, I kind of, and
So
the
first off,
price,
he's in violation of Facebook Marketplace terms of service.
the price is good.
Yeah.
$125.
That's called come to my storage and pick it up and leave all your
Yeah, that's
weapons in
where-
the car so I can rob you.
Yeah, that's where it gets a little bit. And he doesn't live far from me. He's in Chesapeake. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to tell him, hey, $125. I'll look at it. But then I'm thinking, okay, it's a PV Millennium that he hasn't seen in a long time. He put in storage. Is it in storage that in this area? It better be in storage that's air conditioned, because otherwise, it's just.
It probably is. It's probably trash.
Yeah. And so,
might be
and that's
trash
why
anyway.
$125.
Well,
But anyway-
they're not super expensive anyway. I looked at one for like $300 a while back. So
Yeah, I mean, if it was in a decent shape and it was $125, and I could look down it and make
yeah,
sure that it's not.
and then you could turn the truss rod to make sure it's not snapped.
Exactly, because it might have come undone just from heat warping it in and out. But anyway, so yeah, I think we've come to a good place, a good
Yes.
stopping point. I think next week we could talk about that. I think looking at the history of how Gibson and Marshall.
Well, talking about the mechanics of loudness too, I think 'cause
Yeah.
it's a big part of that conversation that drives like the approaches to solve. So basically, what I'm gonna rationalize is that of the 4 or 5 people who were like influential in amp design, they all aim to solve the same problems, but they did it in completely different ways.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's just a problem solving approach. And you'll see that like science actually says that some of these guys were just legit wrong. But it didn't mean that their designs didn't, exist forever in perpetuity. They just had differing ideas with science, and that made them wrong.
We'll talk about it more then. But there was the I use this as a term of endearment, by the way, having been in the weapons industry, mass weapons, by the way. You could go with the Russian approach of just putting a whole shitload of it on one place and being as loud as possible, which is what our friends at in the band Grateful Dead did with their that picture you people see with the bunches of speakers. Okay, that's real.
That whole thing. So that whole thing, like everybody's like, oh, it was just to be loud. There's more to it than that. We'll talk about that.
No,
I think that's what we should talking about. Yeah.
That's right, because it wasn't about being loud, and that's what a lot of people, when they see a lot of speakers, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's about." Or that huge what is it, a 40 10-inch speaker Ampeg or something?
Yeah,
they've got that one. That's not what it's about. It's not about being loud, folks. That's not what it's for.
I should talk about the one. There's a Fender amplifier that I saw and read about the other day that was like, I about shit myself when I read it. I was like, they made this? This was a thing? and it was, and it's outrageous. There is an outrageous Fender amp we're going to talk about next week.
I actually want to be surprised next week about that. So yeah, I think that these kinds of things, they're there, and we have, like I said, the wah-wah. JHS did a freaking fantastic video about the wah pedal, and I always find it so funny to listen to the guy that built it. Can't remember the engineer's name, because I keep thinking Clyde McCoy, and that's not who it was. And here's a guy, Clyde McCoy. They probably paid him, $500, $1,000, whatever, and said, "Yeah, can we put your name on this pedal?" So your McCoy, Clyde McCoy wah, or your Clyde wahs are named after a washed up has-been trumpet player who really wasn't all that good.
Well, they thought it would get used on trumpet too. That was the other thing.
Well, because they wanted to sell it to Lawrence Welk type big bands that had 4 or 5 trumpets in a band.
But they didn't realize they should have just played the long game.
Yep. Well, which eventually is what happened. But
they wanted that quick fix money. Did you see?
And the guy that designed it, he was not only electrically engineering savvy, he was a good guitar player.
No, I know.
Yeah.
We're gonna end, but before we do that, I want to encourage our viewers to go watch the JHS that pedal musical.
That is worth the watch. I want a t-shirt. I'll wear that next week. Because Addison did so much work. Addison's the guy you see playing bass now and again on the channel. Did so much work to get that to. It took like 3 weeks for that to get from Kansas City to Virginia. And Addison was very patient with me because I was like, does this normally happen? He said, I don't know what the heck's going on. And they were going to send me something else out. He goes, well, if that doesn't come next week, I'll send you out something else. I'll send you a surprise.
So
I kind of was hoping for the surprise. I almost told him, oh, no, I didn't get it. But I'm not that kind of person. I'm not that person.
So honestly, like JHS, and that whole thing, like, I hope they do more stuff like that. I'm not like, I don't really like that kind of stuff. It's kind of geeky. It's like a little bit too much for me, but I was laughing because I'm like, oh, this is so over the top. Like, and Brett Shaw was involved.
Yeah, he did a good job too. He did, and to be honest with you, I enjoyed the whole thing. I mean, there wasn't any part of it where I went, I don't really enjoy this.
I know
don't
we're
really
real
enjoy
late
that.
on the that pedal musical, or is it just the pedal musical? Uh,
Yeah,
we're late on it, but definitely go watch it. It's fun.
yeah. Yeah.
I've been David,
We'll link that. I'm a Jim.
and tonight we've been Practical Guitars.
Play the music.